right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Just going to give another few seconds here for people to trickle in from the waiting room. Um, as we are waiting to get started, feel free to have your video on if you want. We set this up so that it would feel very sort of casual, like a town hall. We just ask that you do keep your mic muted throughout until we get to the question and answer phase. But I will go ahead and get us started here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Katie Auney. I'm the Chief Development Officer and Assistant Dean for External Relations for Merrill College. And I'm thrilled to have so many of you with us today to get to know our new Dean, Rafael Lorente. As many of you know, we've been doing a series of welcome events in person for Rafael around the DMV, but we wanted to make sure to have an opportunity for those of you who are not in our immediate vicinity to have a chance to hear from Rafael and to get to know him a little bit and hear about his vision for the college. So just a couple quick housekeeping notes. We are recording this, so we will have it up on our YouTube channel in the next couple days if you have to duck out early or join us late. The format is going to be sort of an interview format. I'm going to be asking Rafael a series of questions, and then we will open it up to questions from the audience. And we just ask, when we get to that point, we just ask that you use the little hand raising function down at the bottom, and we'll try to get around to call on everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our first question for Dean Lorente. So Rafael, you've had deep connections to the University of Maryland for really about 3 decades now. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey from Miami to Maryland, and what that means to you as you take on leading Merrill College?
I can. Thank you, Katie. First, I'm going to answer the question I want to answer, which is thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you all coming out. We've done 3 of these locally, but I'm really happy to be able to do one virtually for folks who couldn't be in person. I also want to apologize very quickly. The purple line is being built right next to me as we speak, so an occasional loud noise is okay. It's just construction. Anyway, thank you again. It is the honor and privilege of a lifetime to be the Dean of Merrill College. And like Katie said, I am a Floridian with all the Florida man things that come along with it. I grew up in South Florida. I am the son of Cuban immigrants. And I also spent most of my reporting career either in South Florida or working for a South Florida newspaper in Washington and Tallahassee. So I am a Floridian. I apologize now. That said, I'm a Terp, and my connection to this university goes back more than 3 decades. I first came here in the early 90s to get a master's degree. While I was here, my wife Carolyn and I were married. We actually went on our honeymoon between semesters and came back from our honeymoon, moved into a new apartment, and the next day or 2 days later, I walked to the DC bureau of what was then a pretty new Capital News Service. I came back several years later after working in South Florida for several years. I came back as a reporter in Washington. And a couple of years after being here, I started teaching as an adjunct. And in the days before social media, I would show up at 8 a.m., teach a class, and then take the metro downtown. And nobody knew that a newspaper reporter wasn't in his office before 10:30, so it didn't matter. Within probably a year or so of that, we brought two little Terps into the fold. Both of my daughters attended preschool at the Center for Young Children, just across the street from Epley. And by 2005, I was here full time and have been here since then. I taught reporting courses. I've run the Annapolis Bureau of Capital News Service, the DC Bureau of Capital News Service. I've taken students to 2 political conventions at least. And I was the associate dean for the last 8.5 years as I watched this place just absolutely grow and do tremendous new things. And those 2 little Terps I mentioned earlier, they both graduated from the University of Maryland. So I have two alums now, proudly Terps. Finally, just to, if that's not enough, I live within walking distance of campus. So this is literally home. So how did I get here? Or reporting brought me here, journalism brought me here. The love for a place that taught me how to be a reporter, even though that wasn't initially what I went to college for. That's how I've kept coming back to Merrill.
And now that you've taken the helm as dean, I think you've hit your 100-day mark, I think, at this point, or close to it. Could you talk a little bit about your long-term vision for Merrill College?
I can, and I think today or yesterday was 100 days. So yes, I'm officially old news. So I'll give you three sort of priorities that I think are really a key for the college. And I'm happy to expand on any of them or answer other questions. But the first one is continuing to work collaboratively with the university on our enrollment and how that ties to our diversity. Those two are key. They both have to get better. We are an amazing school, but I believe that amazing places can be better. We want to increase our enrollment. We want to increase our diversity. And we want to work to make a journalism education affordable for anyone who wants to come here, and make it so that when they leave here, they're not saddled with the kind of debt that makes it hard to work in our field. And that's really my number one priority. The number two, and this is the parlance of the university. If you've gotten any emails from the university lately, somewhere in there it talks about grand challenges. And grand challenges are part of the strategic plan of the university. And I don't think they could apply any more than they apply to the grand challenge of fixing journalism in support of democracy, or rethinking journalism in support of democracy. That is our challenge. That's the job of journalism education today. And yes, I realize that talking about reinventing journalism in support of democracy sounds grandiose. It absolutely is. We don't have a choice. A good democracy needs good journalists and good journalism. We have an amazing faculty, an incredible staff, the best students, a beautiful facility that one day will be connected by this purple thing being built next to me. We have a curriculum that is as flexible as any in the country, and these days as cutting edge as any in data, in investigative, in podcasting, you name it. We also have a 3-decade-plus history of producing news for the real world and putting it out through the Capitol News Service originally, through the Howard Center for Investigative Journalism, and most recently through our local news network. We are a force for good in Maryland and around the country because we cover stories. Not only do we cover important stories, but we cover them in ways that we think are important. All of that is great, but it's not enough. We won't save journalism or reinvent journalism by only doing that. So what we, and I say we because the faculty is really invested in this, are thinking about is ways that we can support journalism in support of democracy, and particularly local journalism, which is where journalism is suffering the most. So we are looking for ways to use our data strengths, AI in support of, not to replace or cheapen journalism, innovative business models, our collaborative and interdisciplinary ways to help the news ecosystem around us, so that Merrill literally becomes the center of a new and thriving local news ecosystem, hopefully in our state, in our region, and hopefully as a model for the rest of the country. And I got one more, and I said 3, and I stopped at 2. So the last one, I guess, is the most amorphous of the 3, which is, this is really hard. Journalism is hard. College is hard. Life is hard. And what we've all been through over the last 4 or 5 years, and what our world is going through right now, is hard. I want our students, our faculty, our staff to keep working hard, but I want them to have a little fun and put in a little light in the world and get to see each other in different ways. I think too often as a reporter, certainly I'll say this for myself, the great story this morning was just that, this morning's great story. So what are you doing for me tomorrow? I want to add a little fun to that. I want you, our alums, to come back and be proud, or to want to support students, or to be proud to be alums. I want our faculty and our staff to come to work and be happy to be here. And I want our current students, both those who go out to work in journalism and those who do other things, whether that's communications or law school or the Peace Corps or whatever it is they do, to be proud and to take the skills they learned here and make good use of them in the world.
Great, thank you. You mentioned local news. Could you talk a little bit more about the importance of local news to democracy and how Merrill College can play a role in helping support local news?
Yeah. You know, I admit to being one of the people who didn't realize this. If you'd asked me 10 years ago and said, well, local news is what's going to turn our democracy upside down, or the lack of local news, I probably wouldn't have believed it. But it's clear now that we may disagree about tax rates nationally or all kinds of things. I won't even get into specifics. But at a local level, that's where we connect as communities. That's where we decide what we want for our schools, what we want for our kids, what we want for our commute, whatever that be. And it's the one place where we connect to the democracy, to the government, to the functioning of it very directly. And local news provides that connection. It provides context. It provides information that most of us don't have time to go find. And it has really frayed all over the country, even in a place like College Park, where we're inside the Beltway and a few miles from the Capitol. Local news coverage is not what it used to be. So we just feel that it's key to democracy, and then we feel that we can actually help. So I'll give you a small example. The local news network, which some of you may know about, was created a couple of years ago to do some of the same things Capitol News Service and our already does, but at a local level. So a faculty member runs a reporting class and collaborates with other courses in the building to work on projects that have a local interest all over the state. So the project this past semester, this past spring, was about contracts that school boards put out. So how do our school boards, how do our school systems spend their money? They not only went and reported these stories and put out half a dozen stories, however many stories they put out, but they created a database by county across the state that any editor in the state could look at and go, I can now look at our contracts. Within 48 hours of that project going out, we were getting emails from editors saying, thank you, we've always wanted to look at this. We never had the time to put it together. We can put stuff together for news outlets. We can create AI tools to make them make their jobs easier. We can create news apps that multiple small news organizations can use. So that's what we're hoping, that we not only provide content, but we provide kind of the superstructure that helps support the news outlets.
Great. And you also mentioned artificial intelligence, AI, which I think you can't really go anywhere these days without hearing somebody talking about AI and ChatGPT and, and I think often in potentially a negative light that, AI is going to take jobs and, how is it going to affect content creation? Could you talk about ways that you see AI actually benefiting the journalism industry and supplementing the work that reporters currently do? And how can Merrill College be involved in that?
Sure. And I don't want to be Pollyannish about this. AI is probably going to take people's jobs, not just in journalism, in other fields as well. What we see AI is as a tool to either do the things that we used to do, as one of our faculty members calls artisanally. So as an example, I covered small cities in South Florida. We had a reporter for every small city in our county. No news organization can afford to do that today. And that means that there are city council meetings, school board meetings, zoning meetings that are going uncovered and unattended, with or without AI. Can we use AI to crawl through the transcripts of these meetings and find tips for our reporters to make sure that a reporter knows I didn't miss anything the other day because I've got some backup? Can we use AI to help us see better into our coverage? So if I am a new reporter taking over a new beat, I know what my predecessor did if I take the time to see what she wrote. And if she left me a good note, I've got a head start. Can we use AI to look back at the people covering this beat and say, hey, this is where they did a really good job. But by the way, they didn't cover this part of the beat and they ignored this community or these people. So we can use AI in an inclusive way to find our own blind spots, for example. So there's a lot of examples of using AI either to make us better or more efficient, or to give us more context and more clues about what we're doing well and what we could do better.
So as I mentioned at the get-go, you're hitting 100 days here. So I've got a three-pronged question for you, which I didn't tell you I was going to ask you. So
So I'm going to write that down.
Right. So in the first 100 days, what has surprised you? What have you learned? And what have you enjoyed the most?
Oh boy. The surprise and the learn are kind of the one and the same, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. So one of the, other than watching my kids being born and my wedding day, one of the coolest days of my life was a day that this was announced. And I had this just unbelievable outpouring from people here, from people around the country, from friends I hadn't heard of forever. And then, of course, you have to get back to work. And we have the summer, and the summer's pretty quiet here. And so I would wake up over the summer and have my coffee in the morning, and the little voice in my head that says, you're not worthy, would go, they're not going to like you when you come back. like you lost all the energy, right? It was all used celebrating in May. And I can't tell you how opposite it is. The energy in this building, the desire for doing more and bigger things. Every time I walk up to a faculty member, I walked up to a faculty member about 20 minutes before this meeting with an opportunity that had just come up. And I said, look, I know you're busy, but I need a little help, and I can't do it, but you can do it. And it'll take about 10 days. And that's all we've got. And the answer was, of course. And it was this reaction. Their reaction was more ideas to my question. So I guess I'm surprised at just how energetic and just how much people want to do. I thought I knew that, but that sort of surprised me. And in terms of what I've learned, I'll try not to cheat. So I've been going around the building. I'm trying to meet with every faculty member and every staff member in the building before the end of the semester. That sounds like an easy idea, except that universities generate meetings. It's just part of what we do. So there's a lot of meetings on my calendar. And it's been really a treat to talk to, a faculty member who's, who can see retirement in the horizon and is still talking about some really cool thing they want to do. And a young staffer or a young faculty member who has a whole career in front of them and has similar ideas for what they want to do. So that's just been maybe that's what I've enjoyed the most, is those conversations. And I've had about 30 of them. I think I've got another 30 to go.
Excellent. I've got one more question for you. So I'm priming everybody else on the call here to start thinking about their questions. If you don't want to raise your hand, you can also put any of your questions in the chat, and we'll look at the chat as well. But I wanted to give a little warning here before I open things up to audience questions. So last question that I have for you, you talked earlier about the importance of culture to the college, for faculty, for staff, for students, and also for alumni. So how can alumni who are watching today help the college and help support current students?
I'll stay away from the most obvious answer for a moment. But every time you offer to mentor a student, every time when you see a really cool follow what they do, become an audience for Capital News Service and the Howard Center. If you see a great story by one of them, find them on some social media platform and tell them, hey, this is terrific. Tag them, tag us, let them know that when they leave, there's a whole community of you all out there that they're going to bump into in different places. And so in the most informal way, simply being their cheering section would mean a lot to them. In a more formal way, you can mentor students. We have a formal mentoring program. If you reach out, we can connect you to students, and they want to know what you're doing, how you got there. Put yourself back in that. Okay, I won't speak for you. I'll speak for me. I remember being 24 years old, 23 years old, whatever it was in graduate school, and wondering, okay, I know I want to be a journalist, but what's that look like? And how do I take what I've learned and what is it I want to do with it, right? And it was conversations with people who oftentimes maybe they knew they were mentoring, maybe they didn't, but they clearly helped me get there. So mentoring would be terrific. And then the most obvious one, because it's in my contract, scholarship money, and scholarship money. Every little bit matters. The easier we can make it for them to get through, the better. And college students today are busier. Again, I won't speak for you all. They're busier than I ever was. Their lives are more complicated. They work more hours. They have a lot more going on than I ever remember having. So every time we can make it so that they can work 1 or 2 or 3 fewer hours a week, that means they can intern more, or they can write more stories, or they can do other things that will help them get started.
All right, you made it through my questions. Now it's time for the audience questions. So go ahead. If you've got a question for Rafael, go ahead and use the little reaction button, the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, or just feel free to put it in the chat as well, and we will get to it. I know nobody ever wants to be the first one asking a question. All right. Was that a raised hand, Dave Adelini?
It was. And
All
Rafael,
right.
I know when you first came on board, again, we worked together for many years, and I'm so proud of you and everything that you've done for the school. I want, the mentoring part of this whole story is really critical, just like internships are. But I wonder if there's a more, rather than have individuals just kind of reach out on occasion or whatever, I wonder if there's something more formal.
Yes.
You've put together so that those of us who were journalists over the years could say, hey, put me on the list. And if you have a student who's interested in talking, here's my number, that kind of thing. That's one of the best ways that alumni can give back.
And Dave, I wasn't clear. There is a formal mentoring program. Katie can give you all information for how you can volunteer. She can put it in the chat for you. So yes, we would love the formal volunteers. But what I was trying to say is, if you don't have time to do that, if you want to just reach out on occasion, that's fine too. But yes, agreed.
And I would just add to that, in addition to the formal mentoring program that Rafael mentioned, at the end of every February, usually the last week of February, we do an alumni student career week, and alumni have the opportunity to basically do informational interviews with students. We usually start putting out a call for those volunteers in January, and that's something that you can do from anywhere. We started it during the pandemic, so everything was virtual. So students are able to connect with alumni anywhere in the country. And that's something where you can say, I want to talk to 3 students, I want to talk to 5 students. And then students sign up to meet with alumni based on what their interests are. And I know for a lot of those, it's sort of, a student has met with somebody and then it's turned into, sort of an informal mentoring arrangement where they just sort of keep in touch going forward from there. So keep an eye out for that. In January, we'll start advertising for the February program this year. And I see Dana. Is it Dana or Dana?
Dana.
It's Dana.
Dana, wonderful.
All right. So I have 2 things. One, I am a product of Rafael Lorente as the Annapolis bureau chief and my professor for probably more years than I should have been in journalism school, but I survived to tell the tale. So he's a good egg. And then it's been really cool to watch what you all have done since I've been gone. I'm like, I want to go to school here again. But how open under this new, I won't say new, but you all have a lot of different centers, different projects going on. Capital News Service has grown in tremendous ways exponentially in the decade or so since I've been there. It seems that you have a lot of collaborations and partnerships as well as you try to build tools and really make things that, like you said, local news outlets are that sometimes we don't have time to do ourselves. As a leader of a local news outlet too, if we wanted to partner with Merrill for some sort of project or bring in a potential collaboration, what's the best way to do that?
So I'll answer your question, but first I want you to tell people what a cool thing you're doing, because I know you're doing a cool thing. So tell us what you're doing.
So the short version is I started a nonprofit newsroom here in Los Angeles, where I live now. I got tired of seeing what mainstream media was doing here as a disservice to communities of color and historically marginalized communities. And I decided, with all of my Merrill professors resounding in my head, yeah, you can totally do better than this. It's like, just go for it. Unfortunately, y'all didn't send a check in the mail to come with us to say when I discovered how hard this actually is. But no, the name of the outlet is Afro LA. So we cover LA through the lens of the Black community, but showing all LA stories and how they disproportionately, all too often, impact communities of color and historically marginalized groups and vulnerable groups. So
we want to support the Danas of the world. We want to start in Merrill because that's where we think we can have the most impact by, in Dana's case, she is a data journalist, so I don't know that she needs another one, but maybe she does. But by providing the data power, by providing coding business models, we're even talking about trying to think of ways to provide roving technical and editing help. So maybe you're a small news organization trying to launch a big investigative project. You don't have the bandwidth to manage that big investigative project. Can we get somebody to help you with that? Even just the management of a project is a special skill in and of itself. So what I would say, Dana, is we're going to do this locally. As far as beyond locally, anybody who reaches out to us to partner gets a good ear, and a lot of them end up partnering with us. So for those of you who've never seen the Howard Center, the Howard Center for Investigative Journalism, every project, what we pitched to Scripps Howard, who funded to the foundation that funded it, was every project would be collaborative, both inside the building and out. So either with somebody else on campus or with somebody outside of campus, usually both. Every project would be interdisciplinary because the journalists don't always know what they need to know. And every project would have some sort of innovation in it. We'd try something because we don't have shareholders breathing down our neck to make sure that we don't screw up. So we kind of want students to fail on occasion because failure is a great way to learn. So every project has to have some innovation. They have partnered with large organizations like the Associated Press. They've partnered with, a small TV station in Baltimore. They've partnered with all kinds of folks. So you and I should talk. It's been a while.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Any other questions for Rafael?
All right, I'll throw out one more. Rafael, if you could just talk about the Povich Center and its importance to Merrill College, please.
Yes, absolutely. So the Povich Center has, and I forget how many years it's been in existence, has been an amazing, not only a draw for students who want to be sports journalists, but it's been a different voice in the sports journalism world. And I mean, no disrespect to other universities out there, but there are a lot of places where you can go learn to be a sports journalist. There's a lot of places where you can go learn to be to do play-by-play or shoot a game or whatever. The Povich Center has taught our students all of that, but it has always taught it in the context of who Shirley Povich was and what Shirley Povich cared about. So all their projects, and by the way, the Povich Center now regularly partners with the Howard Center on big projects. What kind of projects do? They did a project on the 50th anniversary of Title IX and how it's worked and hasn't worked for girls. They're doing one about a sport right now that I can't tell you because I'm not allowed to describe it. They did one on sports gambling on university campuses. Their projects, the very way they teach is very much the way Shirley's columns were written. They're about making sure that we tell stories with and about people that might not otherwise get told. So, and on that note, they also have the best events. So, Katie, is the event next week available virtually?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
So next Thursday, the 19th, you have to register and a panel discussion, the rise of the black quarterback. When I was a kid, there were no black quarterbacks for a good bit. That has changed. We have Coach Loxley will be here. I'm having name issues because I'm really that way.
Doug Williams.
Oh, Doug Williams, right? The first black quarterback to play in a Super Bowl, and a couple of other panelists. It's just a terrific panel. That's the kind of thing the Povich Center does. They're not just panels to talk about sports, but they're panels to talk about how sports and society interact and why sports is so important to who we are and how we think of ourselves.
Right. I see we have Romney raising her hand. And then after that, Sandra posted in the chat that she has a question about enrollment and diversity. But let's go to Romney first.
Hi there, it's Romney, class of 09 with my master's, so it's been a while. Pardon the little future terp here. I'm on maternity leave from WNBC in New York City.
Congrats.
My question is, oh, thank you. My question is, what is the biggest challenge right now facing journalism students? And I ask that because it's been so long, but I'm wondering, I happen to be a morning reporter for WNBC in New York City. And so when students ask me questions, I almost want to know like where they're coming from. So is it how they can write faster? Is it using technology? Is it like, what are their biggest challenges right now? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put this in two ways. I think their sort of biggest broad challenge is the same thing we all see, right? We see stories about journalism's in trouble and layoffs, and so their biggest challenge is existential, right? What am I going to do? Why am I doing this? Is this going to work? They have all the same fears that many of us had when we were getting ready to enter this profession. In terms of in school, right? You talked about writing faster or technology. The balance there has shifted. Many of us, I always tell people, I feel like I was trained to work on a factory line. But instead of installing parts on a car in Detroit, Michigan, I was reporting and writing stories for this newspaper, and other people did all the other parts of that project, right? We can't, the assembly line broke in Detroit and it broke at the newspaper. And now we have to train students, not just to write well and faster, but to think about new ways to tell stories, to be willing to be uncomfortable, right? This is embarrassing to admit. I worked 13 years as a full-time reporter. I never wrote a headline, not one, a single one ever. And I was proud of that. And when somebody called me at the paper and yelled at me about the headline, I would transfer them. That doesn't work that way today. So I think, that's a very simple example. But now take that example and stretch it across podcasting, across data and data visualization, across AI. There's so much more that's there for them. It's a little bit scary. What we have done is we broke those old silos in the curriculum. So we don't give you a print degree or a magazine degree or a broadcast degree. We give you a journalism degree. And if what you want to be is an on-air television reporter, our advisors walk you through that kind of that coursework. But we left room for you to try something else, because the fact is the on-air reporter is probably going to have to sit in their car or in a van somewhere and write a 200-word story for the website and take care of a social media account long before they go on air. So we've tried to leave wiggle room in the curriculum for students to try different things. That also allows us to try different things. It allows us to teach courses that we might not otherwise have taught if we were sort of siloed and very, very direct. So I hope that answers your question. And can you tell us a name? Who is that with you?
Oh, yeah, this is Mahalia. She's 4 months old.
Very cute. Thank you.
Class of 2045. I did the math.
All right, next, Sandra Weaver.
Right. Good morning. Hi, Katie. We haven't chatted for a while. And hello, Dean. Welcome. We're glad to have you. In your comments, you mentioned growing the enrollment and how you want to increase the diversity in the college. And I'm wondering, what do you see as the impact of the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action? How do you see that impacting what you're hoping to do for Merrill?
Yeah. It scares me, as I won't say the words because I don't think I'm allowed to say them in a Zoom. It scares me a lot. We are going to have to work in this world whether we like it or not. Mm-hmm. I don't like it, but I got to live in it. So what we are doing, and some of this we were going to do anyway, is looking for ways to reach students where they are. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. Journalism is really hard on community college transfer students, no matter where you go. Because if you show up 2 years in, that's 2 years that you didn't work at the student newspaper or the local radio station or whatever. You're behind almost by definition, unless you happen to come from a community college that had a really strong program, and those are few and far between.
Right.
So we are looking for ways to make it easier on the transfer students who come here, either by connecting with their schools to make sure that they take some courses that we can give them credit for, that way alleviating some of the burden when they get here, or by figuring out other joint programs, because they bring diversity of every kind by definition, right? So that's one idea. We have connected with the Maryland Scholastic Press Association, the high school press association, and we have agreed to not only manage but maintain their listserv.
Oh.
It's a little bit of work, but it means we will know who just took over as the journalism advisor at every school in the state, because we're the ones who are responsible for finding out. Mm-hmm. The hope is that not only will we be able to reach some journalism programs in the state, but we'll be able to connect maybe with some schools that don't have journalism programs and find some partnerships to help them, right? Mm-hmm. So again, go where the students are. one of the ideas, and I'm almost hesitant to say this out loud because we haven't quite formulated this yet, but the National Institutes for Computer Assisted Reporting, NICAR's conference is in Baltimore this year.
Yeah.
How can I bring students from around the state to that conference, right? How can I put them in a panel that connects them not only to our faculty members, but some of the best data journalists around the country, so that they see that this data thing is not scary and that there's something to be done with it here. So I wish I had a magic answer for you. I don't.
Right.
But we don't have a choice. We're just going to have to work at this really hard. Part of, when I talked about scholarships earlier, part of what we want to do is raise money for scholarships that we can offer some consistency for, right? So I can tell you, I can give you X for the next 4 years. That applies to a diverse or non-diverse student, obviously, but obviously for a student where economic means are an issue, for us to be able to say, hey, we have this endowed scholarship, you're going to get X amount of money each year for the next 4 years, gives them a certain, a bit of certainty and a little peace of mind, and to know where they're working from. And from personal experience as a college student who had to go back to the financial aid office 4 or 5 times in college and nearly dropped out, I think that would help a lot with our enrollment and our diversity.
I agree. Thank you. Those are
Thank
good
you.
ideas. Yeah. And just a little plug here while we're on, while I have I'm on. 2025 is the 50th anniversary of the National Association of Black Journalists, and Merrill, University of Maryland, is the only college that has 2 of those founders that have attended Merrill. So I'll keep that in mind, and maybe we can chat in the future about, you know, how Maryland can be part of our 50th anniversary celebration.
I sense a lunch in our future.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
And so along the same lines, we had a question in the chat, and then I see Fulvio has his hand raised as well, from Paulette Walker Campbell, from the class of 93, asks, any collaborations planned with NABJ? And before you answer that, I will take this opportunity to plug that the university will be holding its second Black Alumni Weekend, the weekend of April 12th to the 14th. And there will be a journalism specific event as part of that on Friday, April 12th. So mark your calendars for that. There will be more about that in early 2024, but that will be taking place. So with that, I will turn it over to Rafael to talk anything more about potential collaborations with NABJ.
Yes, but first I got to tell you that Paulette and I were students together.
Ah.
So long ago, Rafael, I had to show my face on that note.
How
We
are
both
ya?
look very different, yes.
So yes, in fact, we have been in conversations. We were going to try to do it this semester, but we're actually in conversations with the DC chapter to try to do training sessions here for NABJ DC members. And part of what we're trying to do is twofold. One, do data and investigative journalism training for anyone who wants to, but 2, connect that DC chapter a little more closely to the campus chapter, because that'll give the students a broader network and a lot more connections, obviously. So
Great. And
hopefully in
Fulvio.
February or March.
And Fulvio, it's good to see you on the call. We'll turn over to you for your question.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Fulvio Cativo, class of 06, which feels like somehow a long time ago and not that long ago. Dean, congratulations, and thank you for putting on this with your team. Happy to hear from you. My question was about these post-COVID realities for Merrill. Obviously, Merrill has always drawn a lot of students from out of state, which I cannot relate to, having grown up in Silver Spring, but I know a lot of my classmates came from all over the Eastern Seaboard and really all over the country. So post-COVID, how has that enrollment picture changed, and how has Merrill adjusted or continuing to adjust?
Yeah, so that enrollment picture is more difficult post-COVID. One of the things COVID did is it made a lot of students want to stay home, but it also put a lot of stress on students. And if you're 30 minutes from home and you're stressed out, you can go take a break. If you're 4-hour flight from home, you have to absorb that stress a little more. I don't have numbers for us specifically. I can tell you the university's retention rate among out-of-state students dropped in the last year, and it's clearly sort of the post-COVID hangover. So that's the bad news. The good news is we're still one of the best 3 schools, and we're inside the Beltway. So we're still drawing attention from all over the country. We still draw applicants from everywhere. And I think as long as we continue to do, as long as I don't mess this up, our location gives us that that benefit, that advantage.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Rafael? All right, not seeing any hands. I just put a link in the chat. This is homecoming week at the University of Maryland. So for those of you who might be coming back on Saturday for the game against Illinois, our Journalism Alumni Network is hosting a tailgate just outside in the courtyard behind Knight Hall. So I put the link in the chat for that, for anyone who's coming back for homecoming who might want to join us before the game. Hopefully the weather will cooperate and not rain on us. But it should be a good time and a good chance to connect with other alums. And I just want to thank everybody again for joining us today. I think I hopefully speak for Rafael that his door is always open or almost always open. And he loves to hear from everyone. So certainly if you think of questions later and want to reach out, I encourage you to do so. And just want to plug, and we will send a follow-up email around with links if you missed any of the links that I put in the chat. But just want to plug a couple other things that we have coming up. We mentioned the Povich Center event next Thursday evening, the Rise of the Black Quarterback. We also have our Howard Center for Investigative Journalism on November 2nd at Knight Hall, and it will be streamed as well, is hosting, actually Rafael will be in conversation with Ron Nixon, the investigations editor from the Associated Press, and they'll be talking about the importance of investigative journalism to democracy. And then finally, on Friday, November 17th, we have the Povich Symposium, which is featuring a conversation with NBA Commissioner Adam Silver and the chairman of Monumental Sports, Ted Leonsis. And that will be followed by another panel of journalists, all focused around the future of the NBA. So that will be here on campus at Riggs Alumni Center, and we'll include the link to all of those. So I hope that if you're local or if you're not, if you can log in to watch the live stream for any of those, or join us here on campus. And then for those of you, I know we've got people tuning in from across the country. We will be doing some travel in the spring, so keep an eye out for an event up in the New York area, 1 or 2 events up there. We'll also be doing something out in Los Angeles and probably the Bay Area as well. So for those of you, if you're in any of those areas, watch out for that. We will be taking Rafael on the road in the spring. So Rafael, any last words before we close out here?
First, I want to thank Katie and Zach and her team for making these possible, Natalie and others, 3 of them in person, this one, and I just have to show up and answer questions. So really, thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here, for your support. It really matters. The cheerleading from outside matters a lot. It matters to the students. It matters to the faculty and staff. It's good to know that you're out there. And so on that note, I will put one last plug in, which is early in the new year, there's going to be another big Howard Center investigation. Give it as much of a ride as you can. The students did really amazing stuff on this one, stuff that we've never done before. I can't
All
say.
right. It's all embargoed. He can't tell you yet. But it will be very cool when it gets published. Thank you again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day. Keep an eye out for a follow-up email with links to all of the other stuff we have coming up. And go Terps.